In this lesson, we're going to kick off the section by figuring out how we can add support for file uploads to the Express application. Now, for the moment, we're not going to worry about users being authenticated or the file being of the correct type, such as an image. We're going to start by just getting the basics in place. Then throughout the section, we'll refine the code to fit our specific needs, which is to allow a user to upload a profile picture for their account. So to kick things off, let's talk about how we add support for file uploads to Express. Express by default actually doesn't support file uploads, but there is an NPM library also released and maintained by the same team that releases and maintains Express, and this allows you to add file uploads to Express with just a couple of lines of code. And that's where we're going to start. So let's head over to the browser and check out the NPM library we'll be using. From the browser, we can Google npm malter. That is the name of the library we'll be integrating, and we can check out the npm package page to learn more. This is by far the most popular solution for file uploads when working with Node. The name of the library, malter, is short for multi-part, and this comes from the type of data that malter allows your application to accept. So far, the only data we've sent from the client to the server has been JSON data. We've provided that JSON as the request body, and the server has parsed that JSON into a JavaScript object, and we've used it. We've done this for dozens of endpoints, like the endpoint for signing up, where the email, password, and other information is provided to the server. When it comes to file uploads, we're no longer going to send a JSON body. Instead, we'll be using form data. So right here, this is what's going to allow us to upload files. So we're going to take the file, grab its binary data, and send that off to the server. So right here, we can go ahead and kick things off with a basic example to see how all of this is going to fit into our existing application. To get started, let's go ahead and install this library. Over in Visual Studio Code, we can go ahead and run a following command from the terminal. That is going to be npm I for install. The library is malter at the latest version 1.4.1. Now, once we have this library in place, we're going to explore a basic example right here in index.js, a nice bare bones version. To get started, I will run npm dev to start up that dev server. That is npm run dev. And once the dev server is up and running, we'll actually write the correct code. Now, down below in index.js, we have an example we had worked with before to explore how populate worked. We can go ahead and clean that up, removing it. And up above, we had a commented out example of how to use middleware, which we wrote when we were exploring how we could set up our own authentication middleware. We're going to go ahead and remove that as well. I'm going to add a few empty lines, and right here, we're going to write a little example in isolation of how we could add file upload to Express. Now, the first thing we have to do is load in malter, so const malter is going to come from a call to require, where we require the malter library. Now, typically, we would put this line at the top of the file with our other require calls. The reason I'm placing it right here for this example is so we can see all of the code necessary to get this done. Now, the next thing we have to do is configure malter, and we might configure it multiple times for a single application. Sometimes we might want to accept just PDF file uploads. Other times we just might want to accept images. So we'll end up creating new instances of malter depending on the needs of our application. Now, in this case, we're not going to worry about performing any validation. We'll allow any file to be uploaded to the server. So down below, what are we going to do? We are going to create a new variable, typically called upload, and we are going to call malter to get a new instance of it. Right here, we pass to it an options object, and this is where we're going to provide all of the configuration for the tool. For the moment, we're going to provide just one property, that is dest, which is short for destination, and this is the only one we need to get started. Right here, we can pick a name for the folder where all of the uploads should be stored. I'll go ahead and pick something like images. Now with this in place, we can focus on actually creating a new endpoint where the client will be able to upload these files. To set up the endpoint, we're going to use a post HTTP method, which is required for uploading images right here. That would be app.post. And we'll set up an endpoint for this one. Let's just use something generic for this example. This isn't going to be the actual route that makes it into the final version of the task manager. So I'll use something like /upload. From here, we can go ahead and set up our request and response arguments in our little route handler. And all we're going to do is use response.send to send back a 200 with no response body. Now, when it comes to actually adding support for upload, what we get access to is middleware from the Multer library. So right here, in between the path and the function, we're going to register the Multer middleware, similar to how we would do this with our authentication middleware. What are we going to do? We're going to use upload, and we are going to call a function on it that's going to return the middleware we need to use. And this is single. So right here, what are we doing? We first provide our string argument, then we provide whatever comes back from the call to single as the second argument, and finally we provide our route handler as that third and final argument. Now, single requires a single argument. It is a string, and here we just pick a name for the upload. So I'm going to use something like upload. Perfect. Now that we have this in place, our server is actually configured to accept and save files that are uploaded to it. Let's go ahead and figure out how we can actually get this done. For the moment, we'll stick to file uploads from Postman, but I am going to include a bonus section with the course that'll show you how to get this done from the browser as well. Now, throughout this section, we'll be uploading a lot of different files of different file types to the server, and to make it a lot easier for you to work with the videos, I've included all of the files that I'll be using. You can download them by heading over to the following URL, links.mead.io/files. Here, you're going to be greeted with a download button where you can download a directory called Node Course Images. We're going to take a quick moment to download that. Then I'm going to go ahead and click it to expand that directory and view it in the downloads folder. And right here, I have the contents of the directory. I have 3 images, fall, I have Philly, and I have profile pic, and I have a couple of other files of different types. I have an old Word doc using the .doc extension. I have a new Word doc using the .docx extension, and I have a sample PDF, all of which we'll be using throughout the section as we explore file uploads. I recommend using the same files and images I have here, as it'll be a little easier to follow along. Now, for the moment, it doesn't matter what we upload, so let's go ahead and move into Postman and figure out how to get this done. The first thing I'm going to do is close all open tabs. I have a whole bunch open and I don't want that. So I can right-click any of the tabs and click Close All Tabs. Now, if I've made changes to any of the requests, it's going to ask me if I want to save those changes. I'll go ahead and save changes for everything. And now we're back to a nice empty request, and this is exactly what we're going to start with. We're not going to worry about adding this request to the task app collection, as once again, this is just an example endpoint to see how all of this works. Right here, let's start with the basics. We have to use the post HTTP method, and we're going to set up our URL. Localhost on port 3000 /upload was the URL we decided to work with. Now it comes to specifying the data we want to send across the wire. Now, if I was sending a JSON request body, I know how I would get that done. I would go over to body, I'd go to raw, switch that to JSON, and provide my data down below. Now, in this case, as mentioned earlier, we need to use what's known as form data. This is where we can specify the binary data for a file, whether it's an image or something else, that we want to upload to the server. Now, right here, we are greeted with a series of key value pairs. We could have one or we could have multiple, and this is where we provide the content we want to upload. Now, the key you type in needs to match up exactly with the value you provided to single over here. So here, we're telling Multer to look for a file called upload when the request comes in. If I use something different, Multer's not going to find it. That means over here in Postman, I want to type in upload. Next up, the value. This is where we provide the file itself. Now it's asking us to type some value in. This is not going to work for us since I want to upload an entire file. So all I'm going to do is switch this from being text over to file using the dropdown. Then Postman is going to allow me to select the file from the file system. Right here, we can go ahead and pick any of the images we'd like. Let's go ahead and upload this one, philly.jpg. This is a picture of City Hall in Center City, Philadelphia. I'm going to go ahead and click open to attach that to upload, and all we need to do is send this off. When we send it off, the following is going to happen. First up, it's going to match with the route we've created. We're using post and upload. Then Multer is going to look for the file called upload in the request. It's going to find it, and it's going to save it to the images directory, which it's actually already created. Now that folder's empty, but it won't be in just a moment. Now if the image gets uploaded correctly, then it will continue on running our function and we'll get our 200 response back. Over in Postman, I'm going to click send to work through that process I just described. Right here I get a 200, and if I head over to Visual Studio Code, in that images directory, I now have a file. Now, if we try to open this file in Visual Studio Code, we're going to get the following error. VSC is complaining because it's binary data and it doesn't know how to render the file contents. The only reason that's the case has to do with the file name. So right here, we have a file name, which is just a randomly generated series of characters. We'll learn how to address this a bit later. The problem is that there's no file extension. We can preview the image to make sure it's the right one we uploaded by clicking rename, using the right arrow to go to the end, and just adding the same file extension as the original file we uploaded, which was .jpg. When we do this, Visual Studio Code will learn how to correctly parse the image, and now we can open it up just to preview it. So we won't need to manually change file extensions in the future. That's just a temporary workaround until we learn more about how we can use Multer to upload files. Now it's challenge time. It's going to be your job to use Multer to create a new endpoint for uploading the user's profile picture over in the user router. Now, once again, we're just focused on the basics. We're not going to worry about actually authenticating the user or associating the upload with their user account. We'll worry about all of that as we progress through the section. For now, we can head over to the user router. We can scroll to the very bottom of the file, and I'll paste the challenge comments in so we can talk about what I'd like you to do. So right here, your goal is to add a new endpoint to this router. You're going to set up post/users/me/avatar. This is the endpoint that users will eventually use to upload a new profile picture. Now later on, we will associate the upload with the user account and will require authentication, but let's start with the basics first. So you'll set up that endpoint, and then you're going to set up Multer. So you'll have to require it in and configure it, creating a destination directory. And in this case, I'd like you to save the uploads to a folder called avatars. Now, once you have that in place, you're going to use the middleware with the new request. And when you provide the name to the single method, go ahead and use avatar as well. Over in index.js, I had used upload. You'll use avatar for the new route you're creating. So back in users.js, step 4 is to just send back that 200 response from the route handler at the end, and finally, you're going to test your work. Try to upload one of the other images from the directory I've provided, then go ahead and change its extension and open it to make sure it's the correct image showing up. So take some time to knock that out, test your work, and when you're done, come back and click play. How'd that go? Let's go ahead and kick things off together by setting up the brand new route. Right here, that would be router.post to set up a post request. Then the URL /users/me/avatar. Now remember, The type of data we're sending along is not a JSON body, it is the form data, and that's why we have a completely separate request for uploading the avatar. It wouldn't be possible to combine this with something like the other request for updating a user's profile. So right here, we're going to go ahead and continue on. I'll actually skip to step number 4 to set up our route handler. Right here, request and response, and we'll just use response.send to send back a 200. Now let's go ahead and actually load Multer in and configure it to work as we want it to work. Up at the very top of the file, like we typically do, I will load the library in const multer equals. I'm going to use require to load that library. And once we have that in place, we'll head back down below and actually configure it, specifying the only thing we need to specify, and the only thing we know about, the destination directory. So down here, we can create our new upload. We're going to call Multer, providing the options object, and I will set destination equal to avatars, as I mentioned in the challenge comments for step 2. Next up, step number 3, we actually want to register that middleware to be used with this request. So we'll add upload.single right here between our path and our route handler, and I will provide as the key we're looking for avatar mentioned down below in step number 3. Now that we have this in place, we're actually all done when it comes to the code part of the challenge. We're going to move on to step number 5 and test our work to make sure we can upload files to that avatar's directory. Right here, I will remove the challenge comments. I'm going to save user.js, and we're going to test things out from Postman. Now for this one, we can create a new request inside of the task app collection, as the endpoint you just made will actually be part of the task manager app. So right here, I'm going to add a new request. We can call this anything we'd like. Let's use something like upload avatar. I'll create the request, then I will click it to expand it, and we can start to fill things out. Now, authorization is already set up, but it's not required. We can leave it on though, there's no need to disable it. Right here, we will switch from get to post. I'll use the environment variable for our real requests to set up the URL, then /users/me/avatar. Next up, we're going to go ahead and focus on the data we're sending across. Under body, we're going to be sending some form data, and the key that we picked was avatar. This value needs to match up with the value you chose right here, and mine do indeed match up. Next up, back inside of Postman, we are going to switch from a text value to a file value, and I'm going to pick the file. I'll go ahead and upload this one, the profile picture of a robot. I'll click open, click send to fire it off, and what do I get? I get a 200 response. Over inside of Visual Studio Code, in that avatars directory, I have the very first profile picture uploaded, and to preview it and make sure it's actually what we uploaded, I will just rename it, adding on to the end .jpg. This is going to allow Visual Studio Code to show it, and right here we have that picture showing up. Later on in the section, we'll learn how to actually serve these images up to the browser, but for now, this is just a temporary workaround, allowing us to build up from the basics. Now that we have this in place, we've seen how we can configure Multer to work in our application. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about how we can validate the things that are being uploaded. I'm excited to get to that, and I'll see you soon.